So now we have to introduce our add item feature into our application. But let's take a look at it in our final application so we can understand what it needs to do, so we can figure out the right strategy to approach building it. Well, first, we know that each item has a hover effect, and when we click Add to Cart, it adds it to this cart. If the item already exists, it will increase the count on it, but if it's something new, it'll add a new item here. If we go to checkout, we notice that almost the same component is displayed using the same data, except this one can modify the quantity of those items. But first, let's just build out the basics of this feature while thinking about how we can reuse this capability, because it seems like it's a very similar add to cart feature, which pretty much does the same thing as hitting this icon. We're still adding these items to the cart and increasing the quantity. But the first thing we should tackle is just converting our collection item to have this hover effect, and then set up our Redux files for our cart to be able to store our items. So let's go back to our application and let's first modify this component. What we need to do is actually go to our custom button component, and we are going to first need to invert the colors based on a property, just like we did when we added this custom class of Google Sign-In and those Google Sign-In styles. So what we'll do is we'll add an inverted prop that does the exact same thing as our Google Sign-In, except instead of Google Sign-In, we will say if inverted is true, then add the inverted class. And then in our custom button, we will add in this inverted class. And what it'll do is the opposite of what our regular styling on our custom button is. So if it's inverted, those are the styles, right? Because when we hover, we flip the colors in our normal button. But if it's not, then we want the same color. And similarly, if we hover, then it switches to what our normal button styles are like, with a border of none. Now that we have our inverted button, we just need to import this into our component. So one more thing we want to add is just something to make sure that our text is always aligned. And if we do display flex and justify content center, anything in our button will always be centered inside of our element. Now, let's go to our collection item. And in our collection item, what we are going to add is our custom button from our component custom button. And we're just going to put it after our collection footer. And inside will be our text of add to cart. And what we will also add is that inverted key. And if we look, we should at least see the button. There it is. Now, we do need to add some styles to our custom button that are only unique to our collection item component. So what we can do is we can go into our collection item styles, and we can just manually add them here. So we can say that they're on our custom button. We will first set the width to 80%. We'll also set the opacity to 0.7. We want a position of absolute because we want it always to be absolutely positioned at the bottom of our total height. And that will be a value of top 255 pixels. We'll also need to add a position relative value to our collection item. And now if we look, we'll see that our button is positioned inside of our collection item. But what else we're going to need to do is add that hover animation, because by default our custom button should be hidden. So let's do display none and then add our hover feature on our collection item itself. And what we'll do is we'll first make our image opacity set to 0.8, and we'll also make sure that our custom button gets an opacity value of 0.85. Also need to add our display flex so that we display it. And now if we see, we have our hovering feature on our collection item. So those are a bit of style changes just to make it so that our application now can support that add item feature that we're about to implement.